Let's talk about the shutter and how it stops or shows motion. We already know that it controls exposure, but it can also show motion with a slow shutter speed or stop motion with a fast shutter speed. So we have a bunch of shutter speeds to select on your dial based on the exposure, of course, but also whether or not we want to show motion or stop motion. So we would pick a very fast speed, like 1,000th of a second to stop motion, and of course a slow speed like a half second or 1 second to show motion. And we also have the B setting. Remember, I said the B setting refers to the old pneumatic shutters where you'd squeeze a bulb, put your thumb over the end, and the shutter would stay open until you release the air. A bulb setting on a camera works the same way. You click the shutter, hold it open with your finger or cable release, and when you release it, it'll shut. Using the right shutter speed for the subject is important. So if you're just photographing someone sedentary, just sitting there, you can use a slow shutter speed because there's not much motion going on. If someone was walking, probably want to use a faster 1/25th of a second speed. Race walkers are fairly fast, 2/50th of a second, and a 500th of a second for a jogger. And this is at 1,000th of a second, a speed skater. The distance from the camera is also important. As you can see in this photo shot through a car window, the foreground images are all pretty much blurred, while the tall buildings that are quite away in the background are not quite blurred as quite as much because they're farther away. The direction of travel of your subject is also a factor. If it's horizontal to you, then you want to use a very fast shutter speed. If it's at a diagonal, you can get away with a little bit slower speed, and if it's coming right at you, you can get away with the even slower speed. There are different types of shutters. This is a view camera lens, and the shutter is built between the lens elements. Horizontal focal plane shutters, there's a slit that slides across the focal plane where the film and the sensor is and creates exposure. So it'll move very fast with a high shutter speed or slow with its slower speed. The problem with a shutter like that is you have to be aware of it when you use a flash because this can happen. So there's usually a next by the shutter speed or in your instruction manual to tell you what a safe shutter speed to make flash photos is. A vertical focal plane doesn't have to travel as far, and quite often you can get away with a little bit faster shutter speed for taking flash pictures. Of course, modern cameras, digital, and your phones have electronic shutters. They're always live view in your phone, and it turns the pixels on and off to make an exposure, exposing the whole sensor. If you want to be able to control it in your phone, you need to get a special app like Pro Camera or Halide to do manual control. Slow shutter speed not only shows you motion, it shows you camera shake. So if you can't hold your camera steady, especially with a long lens, you'll get this effect. So by going to a faster shutter speed, I can still hand hold the camera and get a sharper photograph. So there's a formula for that. It's 1 over the focal length of the lens. For example, if you have a 50 millimeter lens, you can safely hold it at 1/50th, or a 200 millimeter lens, you should use 1/250th. So remember, the focal length is we talked about how to calculate that. It's optical center of the lens to where it's in focus, and in this case, it's 180 millimeters. But you don't have to do that because the focal length is always marked on the lens. So this 50 millimeter lens means you can safely hold it at 1/60th of a second. The way you hold your camera is also important to get sharp photographs and eliminate camera shake. So use both hands, put your elbows in close to your body, and you'll get a firm hold on the camera. Of course, if you get a worm's eye view, this is a very stable position. You sometimes can find a support, like in this case, a stump, or some people use a bean bag and roll the window down, put the bean bag there, and you can put the camera on it. Of course, a tripod's the best way to eliminate camera shake, and you can use really long lenses when you use a tripod. You also can use long shutter speeds to show motion. New cameras like this one have something called lens stabilization. So the lens has built-in stabilization, as does the body. It's called IBIS, in-body image stabilization. Some cameras have either or both. So in this case, both the lens and the camera have built-in stabilization. So you can handhold this camera at really slow shutter speeds without using a tripod. Of course, to get really long exposures, you still should use a tripod, but if you do, remember to turn the stabilization off. So here's a waterfall shot at a fast shutter speed, and we pretty much stopped the water. But if you want to have a more creative photograph, you can do something like this. Use a slow shutter speed, and you can see the water motion. And of course, to do that, you need to use a tripod. Sometimes you can't find a shutter speed that's slow enough. So what you can do is use a neutral density filter like this. This photograph was shot with a tripod at 1/8 of a second. When you use a tripod, you go through all the trouble of putting your camera on one. You should also try to use some remote cable release or electronic release to trip the shutter. When you push down on the shutter release with your finger, you could actually shake the camera, and your photo won't be as sharp as it could be. This is really important if you use the B setting. If you forget your release, you can always try this. Set the camera on the self timer and press the shutter release, and it'll take a few seconds before the shutter goes off, and that gives the camera a chance to settle down. Remember, the B setting is great for long exposures if you want to do fireworks or something. But again, use a tripod and a remote release. Some cameras actually have a T setting, and in that case, you click on the shutter release and it stays open until you click it again. And of course, electronic new cameras, digital cameras, will have very long shutter speed times that you can utilize. Another nice effect is panning. If you learn how to pan your camera with the subject that's moving, the background will be out of really blurred, and it'll give you the sense of speed, as in this photo. And in this case, they're not really going that fast. It was photographed in Forest Park, and they're probably only going like 25 miles an hour. But it looks like they're really speeding down the highway. Now, to do it, you use a long exposure, like a 1/15 of a second, and you pan the camera following the subject. So here's another example of panning. This was photographed at 1,000th of a second. But by using a 1/15 of a second and panning the camera, really make this horse look like he's flying. So you want to bet on this horse.